It all began one quiet evening, 25 years ago. The streets of Rumokoro were already dark, the air heavy with silence, broken only by the cries of a baby. A young woman, Margaret, had just returned from the market when terror struck. A gang of armed robbers invaded her home. In the chaos, they took her little baby girl and disappeared into the thick bush behind the village. Margaret ran after them, screaming, begging, calling for help, but no one dared to come out. The night swallowed her voice. Her husband tried to chase them, but the darkness was deep and the gunshots were real. By the time the sun rose the next morning, there was no sign of the robbers, no trace of the baby. Just silence, and a mother's endless cry. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and soon years passed. Margaret never forgot. She carried that wound in her heart like a shadow that refused to fade. Far away from the town, deep inside the Rumokoro forest, something strange happened that same night. An old hunter named Parakarabo was returning from a long hunt. He heard the cries of a baby piercing through the stillness of the forest. Curious and frightened, he hid behind a huge tree trunk, watching. Then he saw them, a group of men carrying a small bundle, the baby, walking fast through the bush. Before he could move, a loud roar shattered the night. A lion charged out from the dark. The men dropped the baby and fled in terror. Parakaribo's heart raced. He wanted to run too, but he stayed hidden. He watched carefully as the lion approached the baby, sniffed it gently, and surprisingly turned away. It did not harm the child. It simply walked back into the woods, leaving the baby crying softly on the ground. When the forest grew silent again, Parakaribo came out slowly. He picked up the baby, wrapped her in his old animal skin, and held her close to his chest. He didn't know where she came from. He didn't know what to do, but one thing was sure. Fate had placed this child in his hands. Years passed. Parakaribo raised the baby as his own daughter. He named her Christabel. She grew up strong, beautiful, and wise, a girl with a quiet mystery in her eyes. People in the village often wondered where she came from, but the old hunter never said much. He only told her that destiny had brought her into his life. Meanwhile, back in the city, Margaret and her husband had another child, a boy. They named him Tommy. He grew up never knowing he once had a sister out there in the world. Time moved on. Life separated stories that were once one. Years later, Christabel moved to the city to study and build a life for herself. She was smart, humble, and loved by everyone around her. And there, by the hand of destiny, she met Tommy. Their meeting was ordinary, a bump in the rain, a laugh, an apology, but something in that moment clicked. They became friends, then lovers. To everyone around them they looked perfect, two souls meant for each other. Their love blossomed quickly, deep and sincere. Tommy introduced her to his mother, Margaret, who instantly loved her. No one had any idea that destiny was preparing to reveal its cruel twist. One evening, during a family gathering, an old guest arrived. Parakaribo, the hunter. Now old and frail, he was invited to speak, to share stories of his life in the forest. He smiled and began, "About 25 years ago, I saw something I'll never forget." The room grew quiet as he told the story, how he saw a group of men carrying a crying baby into the forest, how a lion attacked them, and how he found the baby and raised her as his own daughter. Everyone listened in silence. Margaret froze. Her hands trembled as she held her glass. The story sounded too familiar, too exact. She whispered, "Rumokoro, 25 years ago." Her heart pounded. As Parakoribo continued, Margaret could no longer hold back. She walked up to him, her eyes wide. She said in a shaking voice, "Old man, that baby you found, did she have any birthmark?" Parakoribo nodded slowly. "Yes, right beneath her shoulder, shaped like a small star." The room erupted. Margaret screamed, dropping to her knees. "My child! My baby! That was my baby!" Everyone gasped. Christabel sat frozen, her lips trembling, tears streaming down her face. She couldn't understand what was happening. Margaret stood, crying uncontrollably. She walked straight to Christabel, pulled her closer, and gently removed the edge of her blouse, revealing the same star-shaped birthmark. She fell to the ground, holding Christabel tightly, weeping, "Susan, Susan, my child, this is you!" The room was silent. Even the air. Tommy stood there, pale and speechless. Everyone turned to him, the man who had loved Christabel, who had planned to marry her. Now before his eyes the truth unfolded. The woman he loved was his sister. No one could believe it. Margaret cried harder. Christabel fainted. The old hunter wept quietly, whispering prayers of forgiveness. That night, the Thomas family was never the same again. Love had collided with blood, and fate had laughed in their faces. In the days that followed, they tried to accept reality. Tommy and Christabel could no longer look at each other the same way. The bond that once burned with love now burned with sorrow. Tommy soon left the country, moving to Germany to start over. Christabel stayed behind and years later married another man. Though they both built new lives, they never truly forgot. There were nights when Christabel sat by her window thinking of the man she once loved, the man who turned out to share her blood. And there were nights when Tommy, in Germany, stared at the stars, remembering the face of the woman he could never have. Life went on. Margaret grew old, still haunted by the memory of that day. Sometimes she would hold Christabel's childhood picture and whisper, "If only we had known sooner, maybe things would have been different." But fate has no mercy for timing. It keeps its secrets until the right moment, and sometimes that moment comes too late. In the end, they all learned that destiny is not always kind. Sometimes it brings love only to remind us how powerful blood can be. And so, the baby lost in the forest, the hunter who saved her, the mother who never stopped crying, and the lover who turned out to be a brother, all became part of one haunting story, a story that reminds us that love and destiny are two powerful forces, but only one always wins.